Good evening, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Petovich here at WCNC and our live weather impact. We are talking about cold now, the weekend after our ice storm, which thankfully stayed below crippling threshold, but what it did do is disrupt a lot of travel thanks to that sleet and ice. And tonight we're seeing Arctic air spill into the region. We're going to start in the mountains because it's been snowing most of the day with northwest flow snow behind this Arctic front, which is moving into the region. Now, it is really cold up there. I got a friend up there just said it's like 2 degrees currently at Beech Mountain, a wind chill of -10. We've got all kinds of extreme cold weather warnings, extreme cold weather advisories. Basically means this is just going to be cold. Now, if you're wondering, these are new terms to you, basically the wind chill advisory warning criteria has gone away. We just wrapped them into cold. So whether it's because of wind or just cold in general, it's all the same advisory now, which makes sense, right? I get people that joke with me all the time. It's like, what's the temperature? And if you tell them it's a feel like reading's 10, and then it's 10, So people, what it feels like to you. The only thing about the wind chill, remember, it doesn't freeze water quicker. It's just what your body interprets. So right now we're below freezing here at 6 o'clock. So all that melting, everything that happened today, we're getting a refreeze right now. It is going to be brutally cold tonight. The Arctic blast overnight into tomorrow morning might stay below freezing through about midday tomorrow. The impacts, obviously, we're going to see bitter cold, single digits in wind chill, but a lot of black ice. It won't be everywhere either. And it's actually, in my opinion, this is kind of a worse setup for travel in some cases because most of the roads will be fine and people will get up to full speed and they'll get off the exit ramp or turn on a side street, and it's going to be a sheet of ice. So the speeds that people get on the dry pavement end up being a problem when they get to the icy patches. So dress in layers tomorrow. Protect your people, pets, pipes, and you have tropical plants. Protect those as well. You can grow those in the Carolinas, but not in this bitter cold. See that northwest flow? That is a big Arctic air mass. Remember, we've got snow and ice on the ground over Texas, Oklahoma, northern Louisiana, parts of Mississippi, Alabama. So this cold air diving down is over refrigerated ground. We call that an air mass that won't modify or warm up on its own because it's being chilled the whole way down. So the feel like readings tonight are pretty brutal. I mean, yeah, that's a -18. That's what it's going to feel like. Even across the Piedmont, there could be a few spots where it feels like it's below zero, if not single digits. So, we already have school virtual days tomorrow, e-learning for a lot of districts. If it wasn't for the black ice, we'd probably have some just because of the cold. The buses here, the diesel buses, don't work really well in these type of temperatures. The fuel tends to gel up because there's not additives. We use summer blend down in the south. We don't have a winter blend for that fuel. So temperatures in the morning, brutally cold. Good news, the kids won't be at the bus stop tomorrow. That wind will be howling all day long. It'll start to taper off in the afternoon, and we'll see calmer conditions, but a pretty cold week overall. These are the actual low temperatures tomorrow. So Charlotte 11, maybe a few spots colder that has a little bit more sleet on the ground, but it'll be the coldest morning we've seen this season. And during the day tomorrow, the good news, full sunshine. So if you're in the sun, it feels great, but that southwest wind, normally a warming flow for us, not as much this go around because it's coming from a cold air mass to the south and west of us as well. The reason we're going to stay so cold, we have a massive dip in the jet stream. The polar vortex, a little lobe of it is broken off and gone into eastern Canada. And the polar vortex doesn't come into the United States, but its weakening up there will help drive cold air into the United States. So you see these waves of cold air with a dip in the jet stream. This is the polar opposite, literally, of what we had in early January when it was record heat. We had a ridge across the country. I mean, we had 70s, almost near 80, which is unheard of in January. Now, the pattern is completely flipped for the second half of the month. And not only do we have cold, but you get this cold for this long, you got to watch every storm. So now this weekend, yes, for the third weekend in a row, we're watching potential. 2 weekends ago, wasn't much of a big deal, just flurries. We know it was not going to be a problem. This weekend was the ice storm threat, the wintry mix. This weekend, kind of more of your classic snow setup because plenty of cold air in place and a storm track, depending on the track, that could be favorable. So I got 3 tracks to break it down for you. The nothing track, which is out to sea, probably not going to impact us at all. The something track, which is kind of favored right now, just close enough to throw moisture back towards us in the Piedmont and produce at least light snow. And then there's the winter impact track, which means further west, more moisture and maybe more of a impact from snow. So it's certainly something we're watching, and I'll kind of show you the nor'easter setup here, and it is a classic nor'easter setup. You'll see the low pressure develop and try to throw snow. Probably not going to be anything on Friday, but as we go towards the weekend, if this low cranks up close enough to the coast, and again, I will tell you, trends in models like this far out, if they trend anyway, they tend to trend back to the northwest. So I do think we'll see some type of wintry weather in parts of the Carolinas. It's just a matter of how much it impacts. But you can see this track is just kind of barely offshore, so probably a glancing blow for us. But in eastern North Carolina, it could be more significant. Now, if it tracks further west, we could be onto something. Right now, and I don't know if this graphic really hasn't updated, but almost all of North and South Carolina are in the 10 to 30% chance of wintry weather. And what does that mean? That means a 1/4 inch liquid equivalent. So that's either 2.5 inches of snow, 2.5 inches of sleet, or a 1/4 inch of ice. I don't think we're going to see any ice. I don't think we'll see sleet. It's going to be snow or nothing. That's the kind of setup this is. So a little bit more straightforward than this past weekend when we had an icy mess to deal with, and the difference between sleet and freezing rain was going to be pretty tight. So you see the cold air. This is beginning of February now. I mean, I don't know what happened in January. It flew by, but we're getting into February, and we're going to stay way below average here in the southeast. So significantly colder air for this time of year. It's already the coldest time of the season, right? When we're supposed to be around 52, 53 for a high. That is the coldest low or average high, I should say, for the whole season. The fact that we could be 10, 15, 20 degrees below that, not for a day, but for an entire 10-day period. This is going to be really cold. So I do think the cold weather impacts are going to build slowly but surely over the next 7 to 10 days, because when you have a stretch of cold weather like this, overnight lows, teens and 20s, afternoon highs barely getting above freezing for just a couple of hours each day, you tend to start really cooling down the tap water in the pipes, and that's where pipe issues become an issue. It's not the Arctic blast that always causes the issue, it's the duration. And that's just been my experience here. That's when we do see pipe issues. And we had a water main break today that may have been partially related to that. So that's something we're going to have to keep a close eye on. If you have any doubt at all, or you've ever had pipe issues with cold weather, this week you need to take full precautions. If you haven't covered the spigots outside your house yet, do it now, even if you've been safe so far, because as this cold air builds, it's just going to get worse and worse. So tomorrow, frigid start, 11 in the morning, 14 by 7. As we go into the afternoon, those temperatures barely getting back into the upper 30s. Your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast. This is kind of telling. Just look at this for a second. I'm going to leave this up there for a good long time because we've got a lot of cold nights and really chilly days. The average high is 53. The average low is 32. We'll go 10 days into the future, and you could see that's a 10-day stretch where the warmest high temperature is 45, and the coldest, or say the warmest low temperature, is freezing, 32, and that's not until 10 days from now. So you talk about a cold, cold stretch of weather. That's why this past weekend, if it was snow this past weekend, this could have been an all-timer for the amount of snow staying on the ground for a long duration. The only time I remember a stretch like this long was back in the winter of 2010-11. We had a stretch like this, and I actually, the one time in my life, none of the pipes in my house, but the water line from my house to the meter broke, and it was buried, and I had to dig up the front yard and get it out. And it was because of a cold snap like this. It just was so long, and there's nothing more more scary to wake up and see water pouring down your driveway, and you just hope it's on the city side of the meter. Unfortunately, it was not. Had that water run for a while as they came out and fixed it, and thankfully the city was great. They gave us an 80% reduction on our bill because they knew it was leaking, but you got to call it in. So those are the type of things, especially if a lot of people have issues. Not only could you have pipe issues this week, but it could be a long time before the fix. So coming up, Tim and I will talk about a post-mortem on the weekend storm. We'll talk about the cold snap, and obviously we'll talk about the upcoming winter event. We've got a lot to talk about with Tim Buckley coming up in 2 minutes. Stick around. All right, welcome back. Tim Buckley joins me from WFMY, and Tim, I wanted to start tonight because obviously we've been very busy. All of us have been. It's been a long stretch, but I wanted to talk briefly about the weekend storm, put it in the past, and then move on to the future. But just to kind of recap what happened this past weekend. I think I got a lot of thoughts. You guys have seen my social media posts. You probably could see what I think. But I'll be completely honest and transparent with everybody like I was in my post. We thought we'd see more of a crippling, devastating ice storm. That did not happen, Tim. And it's not that it wasn't possible or that we weren't even close. It was close to happening. In fact, in Charlotte on Sunday night, we were commenting here. It was raining. It was freezing rain pretty good last night about this time. And the glaze on the trees here, it was getting thick. And I think if we had literally an hour or two more of that, Tim, we would have had significant issues, but it just stopped. And because of the sleet early on and because we didn't get the early accumulations, by the grace of God or whatever you want to call it, we missed a major significant ice storm. But I want everyone to know, too, we still had a major winter storm, Tim, with major travel issues and an ice storm technically because we got a 1/4 inch plus over a big chunk of our area. It just wasn't the high end of that. So talk a little bit about your thoughts on it. I know you had some really great posts about it, and we talked a little bit about the craziness of the storm because from a meteorological standpoint, we could probably study this for the next 2 years and not really fully understand what just happened.
Yeah, and I think we will, and I think any of the, in our circles, just other forecasters that we chat with or compare notes with, a lot of people maybe not scratching their heads because I think we understand what happened, but it's a very unique system. Unique for a couple of reasons that you had such high stakes. A lot of times when you have a forecast, the stakes aren't quite so high. But in this case, we were just a degree or two here or there away from crippling impacts of down trees every place, people without power with an Arctic blast on the way. How close were we to bad impacts? Well, the National Guard was on standby in Greensboro. Duke Energy sent 18,000 crews to the Carolinas. I guarantee you they're not interested in wasting money, right? Yeah. So this was a real threat. And something that I think, looking back on it, we can see a couple of signs, right? That maybe that sleet potential. And we talked throughout the week that, it's hard to get freezing rain if it's 19 degrees. Well, it was 15 degrees in Greensboro for a big chunk of this event, and we got a lot of sleet. So, that was in the cards. Yeah. But, boy, you should be prepared that if you got that freezing rain the whole time, we would have been like Nashville. We would have been like Mississippi is right now. I mean, the pictures coming out of there are terrible. And it's so wild. I think you made great points on your post, something about if you wear a seatbelt in your car and don't be mad when you don't get into a crash or something. That's exactly right. This was one of the first events, Brad, that I personally really prepared for quite a bit. Winter storms don't spook me that badly, but I was a bit worried for our home and our pipes and all sorts of things. And now I'm less worried because it was, of course, better than it could have been. But definitely a weird system. And what really concerned me the most was I think it was the first night, Saturday night, you had posted or reposted a couple things of freezing rain mixing in at the beginning of the event, right around 9 p.m. I haven't revisited yet. What do you think happened there when we switched over to a little bit of freezing rain in spots? Was that a mirage or was it more of like a sleet freezing rain mix? Because usually when that starts, you don't go back afterwards. Yeah. But we did go back.
That was really odd, Tim. That's the one thing, I started having that oh no moment too, because oh man, this wasn't supposed to start as freezing drizzle, right? And it was funny, we were just talking in the studio about those of us that were here that didn't stay at the hotel drove home. I drove home, and we were commenting last night, the drive wasn't bad. It wasn't great, I'm not going to lie. It was really thick, slushy sleet, but it was like driving in snow. So it was actually a lot easier than driving home Saturday night when it was that thin glaze of ice, which I thought was way scarier driving home than in the thick slush last night, because I can get traction in that sleet. It was pretty deep, and it wasn't great as long as you went slow. But man, I tell you what, Saturday night was crazy. But yeah, that was kind of the concerning part. I went home in that icy stuff Saturday night thinking, And then overnight, I could hear the sleet banging against my window, and I woke up, and it was like people thought it was snow, but it was sleet. I knew it had sleeted all night, and I was like, wow, and we might have dodged one there because it was sleet. But then, we just had drizzle and mist kind of most of the day. It was just a weird storm. So I want to quickly I'm going to show my maps just for a second because I want people to see. I like being transparent. So this was our sleet and snow forecast for the area. We had a trace to 1 inch for Charlotte south from Charlotte north. So Charlotte, you could argue anywhere from a trace to 3 inches. And then we had snow, ice up north. Our ice map wasn't great. This is the one thing we didn't verify. The crazy thing is, if I would have just taken off the higher end total contours, we probably would have nailed it. But we had some higher end contours in there above a half an inch. We did have a few spots report a half an inch, Tim, but that was like the high end for, I think, Concord ended up with a half an inch. But here were some of the ice and sleet totals from IEM. Our snow and sleet total actually matched up pretty good. I would take that forecast 9 times out of 10. The ice map, kind of weird, it kind of verified to the west and verified to the east. But in between where we live, Tim, it didn't verify. But it was close. I think it's a lot closer than people think. And so I totally get people that were getting ready for a crippling ice storm. I certainly was like you. There's proof in the pudding. My family and I, we were planning nonstop. We had charged everything. We had plans for our neighbors to come over. I have a battery backup and solar power. We had plans for our whole cul-de-sac to be at our house with the power went out. So it wasn't like I was just telling you one thing and doing something different. I agree, Tim. I was getting prepared as well. But the thing I think that's disheartening to me is not, you get the naysayers about, it wasn't crippling, but people act like nothing happened. That's the one that I don't get. It's like, wait. Right. I don't know if you tried driving Saturday or Sunday. It wasn't nothing. It was not. It was not nothing. So let's not go there. It's okay to say, we oversold the crippling part, but telling me nothing happened is a complete and utter lie.
Yeah, that's true. And we still have kids out of school, and they're out of school up here tomorrow, and they'll probably be that way a good chunk of the these are things that have a real impact. And, we talk about that sleet that fell. This stuff is not going to melt. I mean, I was shoveling my driveway today, and I'm glad I did, because right now everything is iced up a lot more than it was even just a couple of hours ago. So the impacts, whatever impacts you had, they're going to stick around. And we knew that ahead of time. And, when you have that much moisture available, I think two things really happen with the forecast. A little bit colder at the lower levels, and not quite as much moisture available as what was predicted. I think in Greensboro, we ended up as about 0.8 of an inch for QPF, for the moisture availability. Most of the averages were around 1.5 inches ahead of time, which really concerned us. So that was good overall. But both of those were probably the big flies in the ointment for getting us the better outcome, which is good.
Yeah, and just one last point, like you said, I remember us talking last week and thinking, man, can it be freezing rain at 19? And as you said, we thought the 19 might have been too cold, and it wasn't cold enough. It was crazy. It was actually colder than the guidance, which I'm really fascinated. Meteorologically, Tim, it's crazy what was happening below the warm layer. It was like the coldest, shallowest warm layer I've ever seen. We had snow and stuff forming there that normally should never form in that layer of the atmosphere. It was just really odd.
I had a couple of what the moments here at the station. And one of them was a positive one. It was that first night when I was leaving to do my drive out of here. It had been freezing drizzle, it had been sleeting, and it turned into snow. And one of our reporters, and I love our reporters, and they're out in the field, but sometimes they say it's sleet and it's really freezing rain, and sometimes they say it's freezing rain and it's really sleet.
I had someone say it was hail.
Educate, and it's a little hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
But in the last couple lives they did at 11 p.m. on Saturday, they said, well, I think it's snowing right now. I was like,
you're like, what?
And then when I left, it was freaking snowing outside. I was like, this is so surprising to me. So there were a lot of surprising moments, and it'll be a storm I remember probably forever, I would say, for that reason. Yeah,
me too. And so we'll move on to the cold air, because I think also, Tim, it's kind of, this will be retrospective as well. Part of the reason the ice storm was so heightened with communication, it wasn't just the ice storm. It was going to be the aftermath, right? We've got this Arctic air mass, which is now over us. And just to give you an example, if we would have had that ice storm any other time of the year or in the spring, let's say we had a derecho. Tim and I are tracking a derecho, a high wind event in April, and we know there could be massive power outages. We would be talking about that a lot, but we probably would not be worried about prolonged power outages because it probably would be 60 or 70 degrees outside. It wouldn't be a big deal. But when you think you might have extended power outages, Tim, and then it's Arctic air behind it, just like in the summer, if we get a hurricane and we know there's a heat wave coming after it, that would make us react differently to that event because the aftermath could be way more dangerous than the actual event. And that was part of the reason, too, that this storm was talked about so much, because the outages wouldn't just be a one-day thing. They would be during an Arctic outbreak, which is what we're seeing this week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and this is exactly what people are dealing with in Nashville right now. I haven't checked the power outages there today, but I know they were around the 300,000 to 400,000 range just in the Nashville area.
Yeah.
And, you know, one meteorologist I follow, he's out there and he was posting all kinds of crazy pictures, but he said already, this was as of yesterday, I think their home was already into the 40s for their temperatures. And, you know, they're going to be down in the single digits for lows. That could have been us, and that's really something that's tough to deal with and tough to stay warm with. So be careful out there tomorrow morning, but at least we have power. We can kind of just hang inside and try your best to stay warm.
So with this cold air in place, Tim, as you and I talk a lot about winter weather, one of the things we always lack here is a bunch of cold air for winter storms and winter weather. This week, when I see 7 days or 10 days of really cold air, you're like, well, at some point you're going to get a low pressure system, right? And sure enough, by the weekend, it does look like we've got a low pressure system. Now, it's way too early for specifics and tracks, but I think, Tim, you would agree that unlike this past weekend, which was going to be a wintry mix, and we didn't know how much of each, but we knew it was probably going to be a mix, not much snow. I think this system this weekend, it's either going to be snow or nothing. There's like no in between. It's kind of one of those setups where, we'll probably get either a little bit of snow, no snow, or a whole bunch of snow. There's no ice, freezing rain mix thing probably likely with this one.
Probably is the best way to put that. I think I agree with that premise for sure. I was kind of telling my boss here, she was saying, is there really another storm? I said, well, like, maybe I don't tell you about it until tomorrow. But there are those chances. But I agree with you. And I was telling her, I was like, this is either a hit or a miss. It's last week we knew there was going to be a hit.
Be something,
guaranteed.
Yeah.
We were just figuring out the flavor. And at first it looked snowier, then trended icier. That wasn't a surprise. We've done this a while. We know those things happen. This one, based on what you said, and I have a couple tracks that I drew on here for another storm a couple weeks ago. But if it's offshore, like a track number one, hey, that's great if you live in Wilmington and you want some snow. That's kind of what they got in the big 1989 snowfall where they had a foot, and they still talk about it. But usually you're dry in Charlotte and you're dry in Greensboro on that kind of a track.
Just cold and
number
windy.
2 is what you want if you're a snow buddy over here. That's what you want is number 2. And number 3 is usually messy, but number 3 is probably not on the table. I don't think either, Brad, because this isn't even really starting as a low in the Gulf, probably. It would probably just be a cyclogenesis over the Atlantic, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, the Euro tries to develop it in the Gulf, but you're right. It doesn't really get going until it's to the east of us, which is always, that's a little harder to get the precipitation back west, right? It's usually going to be a coastal thing. But the air is so cold that I don't think you need a ton of lift to create some really fluffy, light snow maybe back to the west, which in that case, it would be light. It wouldn't be a ton, but because of the cold air in place, it might be more impactful than you think for just a few flurries here and there because the ground's going to be cold. So I think it's an interesting storm, but right now I like dealing with these type of setups much better than last weekend, to be honest with you, because this is the kind of event where this could be kind of fun and not a big a deal, and we're not talking massive power outages, which I'll go back to this past weekend. That was the worst part about the whole setup.
That should be off the table. Natural disaster should be off the table. Now, it could still be a big mess for somebody. Like, if these things really crank up, somebody can get high totals. But we just don't know. So what's the sense in stressing over that on a Monday? That's what Wednesday and Thursday are for, when we're preparing a little bit more. But as of right now, I'm not super worried about that.
Yeah, and so the Weather Prediction Center has us in the 10 to 30% chance of wintry precip this weekend, which seems about right to me. This map hasn't updated, but if I were to redraw it, the whole state of North and South Carolina is in that light green, basically, with a very small section in eastern North Carolina, 30 to 50. So that kind of shows you kind of the general area. It's probably going to be more east, and we'll watch the trends on this. But Tim, before we go, we're almost out of time. This will obviously be the talk probably every day this week. But let's also talk about the cold air, because tonight's brutally cold. But I'm actually interested in your thoughts on this, because I think this week could be interesting for pipes, because one of the things in my experience, duration of cold tends to lead to pipe issues versus short blast. And with the prolonged cold snap this week, I do wonder if more and more people might develop pipe issues as we get later in the week.
That's a good point. Yeah. So most mornings, this will be the worst one tonight into tomorrow morning. But even after that, I have us in the teens basically every day through the next week. It's not going to warm up at all. So do you have any tips for keeping those pipes safe the best, easiest way?
I just think, see how cold that water is coming out of the tap. I think that's going to tell you a lot about how cold it's getting. I just remember this, and this is my personal experience, because we had a stretch like this in 2010-11. It was like a week where I think the highs were in the 30s, the lows were like this. And we didn't have our house. Thank goodness our house was fine. But the line between the house and the meter did break in the yard, and that was a mess. So you might be shocked. You might do everything right inside your house, and then something going out to the main water line breaks, which is something that happened to me. So be safe out there. We're starting to see some of these issues develop. It will be a long week, and we'll have you covered. Stick around. We're going to have more news coming up after the break.